my name is Rich. My last name, I say it Yule, but I've been told it's Uhl, and it's German, and I say it wrong, so that's okay. But I say Rich Yule. Um, I am married to this wonderful human. Her name is Amy. We've been married for 25 years. She is my coach and my advisor and many, many other things, as well as the mom of my kiddos. I have 5 kids. I'll show you just briefly. So this is my daughter, Madeline. She's 23. You'll see this next picture if you like notice her hair transformation. It's pretty awesome anyways. She's 23. She wants to become a psychologist. She's currently going to school online through Washington. My next oldest is Dayton. You also have to watch the hair transformation in this one too. That's pretty fun. He lives in Utah. He's married to this fine lady. Her name is Cindy. So my daughter-in-law, Cindy. And then I have a son, Fox, who also, yeah, in 2 years, you're gonna be like, what happened to this family? Looks very different. He goes to Waimea High School. He is 17 and just a ton of fun. Let's see, Maddie is an artist. Dave likes music and is a musician. He is currently doing construction and landscaping in Utah. Fox is in high school. Eleanor is like our fashion consultant extraordinaire. Like she just, when she goes out, like it doesn't matter where she's going, she just is always dressed very nicely and put together, and she has like this natural style. And she has won dance competition, so she's like she's pretty good at dancing, like more school-based ones, little fun ones, but she's a pretty good dancer, so that's fun. She's not like professionally trained, she just has rhythm, like really good rhythm. It's pretty awesome. Fox, on the other hand, is actually professionally trained, and he has done ballroom dance as well. So kind of an interesting, unique character. And then this is Jocelyn, the baby of the family, who is very musically inclined. She can play the cello, and she learns to play things by ear. She is teaching herself to play guitar and piano as well. So anyways, there's the fun transformation. Maddie's hair is gone, which is pretty fun. Dade's hair is there. I think they traded. It is really kind of what looks like happened here. And then you can see Fox grew a beard and a whole bunch of other stuff happened to him in the short 2 years. So yep, this was taken about a month ago. Actually, that picture was taken about a month ago. So some hobbies and things about me, just briefly. I love to ride bicycles. My favorite place to ride is, well, I've started expanding it. I ride from Hanapepe all the way to the Polahali Gate and back. That's one of my favorite rides. So that's really a lot of fun and a good little area. Or Waimea, just from Waimea out to the gate and back. That's really fun. But that's my happy place. School for me was kind of an interesting thing. So in school, I struggled to learn the way that like school was teaching. I don't know how else to say it. Like I didn't like the learning process, and I felt like it was I don't want to say boring, but it's slow. It felt hard. Like it felt hard for me. It was just difficult. It was challenging. But I love to read. I love learning. Science was like my favorite subject. Biology, I loved biology in high school. It was my favorite subject. Technology, from the time I sat down in front of a like Apple IIe computer when I was in, I want to say it was kindergarten, maybe first grade, I was like, this is my thing, right? Like this computer, I knew how it worked. Like it just all made sense to me. I was like, I'd been sitting there and I'd done that before. So, and you know, I went through junior high, and in high school was really when I started to struggle the most, right? Like just the structure, all that kind of stuff. And I didn't do so well in school, and I opted to get my GED as the path to graduate and finish school, which is kind of an interesting choice. Looking back at it, I'm like, I can't believe my parents let me do that. Like there's all these like other elements that I'm like, you know, kind of there, but honestly, I love to read and I love to learn. When I was in junior high, I love to learn about technology. And so I couldn't afford the books that I loved to read because they were all really expensive. Computer books back in the 90s were like $100 for that. And $100 in the 90s that was a lot of money. And for a kid, there was like no way. So my mom put me in speed reading classes that I took after school, and I learned to speed read. And then I would go sit in Barnes and Noble for hours and read the books because I couldn't afford to buy them. So I just would go read them in the library that had the technology books. So that's kind of the beginning of my technical education stuff there. After high school, or after I took my GED, I immediately went into technology training. So I took tech school. I went the tech school route. And none of them really had anything except they would prepare you for a certification, but the school didn't give you the certification, right? And so my education was more about learning about Novell technologies, Microsoft technologies. There's a thing called A+, which is about computer hardware that I went and took. And I just took every computer technology networking course I could. I was very interested in computer networking. So networking was something that I was very fascinated by. I had tried programming when I was younger, so I learned how to program in a language called Pascal. Nobody uses it anymore, but there was one that I learned in my high school, which was C++, which is still around. That still exists. People still use that a fair amount. I enjoyed it, but I struggled with programming because of my brain. I think I'm a little bit on the compulsive side, and so I couldn't shut my brain off, and I couldn't rest at night. I was always coding in my sleep was essentially, I guess, what was going on, which was great. I'm sure I would have made an amazing software developer in that side, but I didn't feel like I could sustain it. So anyways, I decided networking was more my thing, and computer systems were more fascinating to me, and I could sleep at night. So that was kind of how that evolved in there. My career path. So when I was 16, I went to this place that I knew was doing technology work, and I had like no business probably applying there. And they were doing phone support for the early days of the internet. So there was AOL, some of you may have heard of, or before the internet, there was AOL, and there was a thing called Prodigy. And I went and did a test, and they had me type, which I was really fast at typing. So I did really well on that. And then I also, because I could read fast, I passed the other part of their aptitude test, and I got a job doing phone support for modems and connectivity to the internet and that kind of stuff. So that was kind of my first job. And then I went to work for one of the first internet service providers in Utah, and they're still around. They still exist. I was like the employee 6 or 7 or something like that. My job interview consisted of, here, can you log into this Windows system? I sat down in front of it. I logged into it. They said, okay, can you restart it, do this, and I did a few things, and they're like, okay, you're hired, you have the job. I was like, sweet. So anyways, that was kind of an interesting, like, just being willing to try really opened a lot of doors for me in my career and in my schooling. So that's how I got into consulting. So when I worked there, there was people, this was in the early days of the internet, so people would share one modem for an office. And so one phone line would connect a whole bunch of people so they could all get email. And I started consulting by going to people's offices and setting up one modem for 15 people to connect to get email. And that was kind of the beginning of that. And I loved going in and working with people. I loved seeing a bunch of different offices and all that kind of stuff. So that was how I got started in that. Novell, because I was going to school at night when I worked at that place. So when I was doing that, I was going to school at night and learning about all these other technologies. I got my Novell certification. I met someone from Novell, and they're like, you want to come apply for a job? I got a job at Novell doing consulting services and that. And they were the big player in the space in the late 90s in networking. And then I went to work for Microsoft after that. And that was kind of the beginning of that. So in 98 to 2000, I worked for Novell. In 2000 to 2003, I worked for Microsoft, and I was a consultant. So I would go out and I would help businesses solve technology problems. That's what I did in consulting. The problems were a lot bigger than helping an office of 15 people use one modem. By the time I was doing this, I was helping build, large systems. One project I did for Novell, I was doing a project for the Department of Defense in helping design a global directory that would store certificates for every human being in the United States or whatever. So anyways, just some fascinating stuff, like projects. Some of them got implemented, some of them didn't, but it was fun. I really enjoyed it. I worked at Accenture and I did data center stuff. So at this point we're talking big systems, right? I think total server counts and that kind of stuff when I left there was 3,000 in 3 to 5,000 in one of our data centers, and we had 7 to 8 data centers. And so we had a lot of computer systems that we were working on, and I was doing systems design and figuring out how to make them all work. And it was all primarily travel related, interesting stuff. So I'm going to pause there because I've just talked about a whole bunch of things, and you all have been nodding, but I haven't given you any time to even say, really. So yeah. Any questions? Okay. All right. Are you following me, or am I okay?
Yeah. No, I think I think a really cool thing about your story is you're, going in and getting a job at 16, and, and I think it's so important for kids to know, or students or anybody to know about all these training programs. There's just so many options as a way to get your feet wet and get started. And so this is really interesting. I've heard about them, but I really didn't know much about it. So very cool.
Yeah. When I was doing these big systems with Accenture, and Accenture is one of the biggest consulting companies in the world. They're huge. They're literally one of the biggest. I think they have 500,000 employees or something like that. They're not as big as Amazon, which I think is 1.5 million employees now. I can't believe that, but they're a big company. And my journey to learning about what I do now, which is cloud computing. Are you guys familiar with cloud computing, or would you like a short little kind of explanation or description of that? Would that be helpful?
Yes.
Okay.
I think a short description is good. Everyone, I think you know what the cloud is, but you don't really know.
Yeah.
Or at least I know I don't.
Yeah. So, I mean, in 2003 and 2000 up to 2010 when I was there, businesses that wanted to run systems. So I don't know, anything. So I'll give you an example. One of the customers I worked with was JetBlue, and JetBlue would run their airline reservation systems. And their airline reservation systems, when you'd log into jetblue.com or you'd call or whatever, you'd book a ticket, they would sit inside of these big, massive computer centers with thousands and thousands of computers in them. And we ran 40 airlines, 40 some odd airlines that were running their systems in essentially these 7 different data centers, 7 or 8 different data centers. And the cloud is essentially those data centers, but the difference is instead of me and my team, I actually had a team, there would be people that in the middle of the night, they would go and stay overnight at these data centers. And when something would happen, they'd get called. They had to physically go in and change drive. If a hard drive would fail, a power would outage, any of those things, they would have to do all that stuff. And the cloud is really it's still that data center model, but the scale is even much bigger. And what they do is instead of buying the equipment yourself, you essentially pay for use of the equipment. So a good analogy on this one that I really like is, and I don't remember these days clearly, but in the earlier days of the United States, a lot of companies would have their own generators to generate electricity because they themselves needed the power and electricity, and there wasn't a centralized power grid. And similarly, a lot of people have had their own computing power, own computing systems running in their buildings. But now there's essentially a computing grid, and cloud computing is access to shared computing resources, just like electricity is a shared electrical resource. Is that helpful as far as kind of drawing a connection between those? And so you use the cloud every day, whether or not you know it or not. I mean, if you have an iPhone, an Android phone, you have Alexa devices. Like, I mean, there's no way that you're not using the cloud in some way, shape, or form. Oh. My Alexa felt left out, so she wanted to chime in on that. So yeah, we all use those things. So that's kind of the description of the cloud. How my journey to that came was, I was asked in 2009 by one of the executives at Accenture. He said, "Is this cloud thing I keep hearing about a threat to my data center business?" This is a picture of me in 2009. This is literally the picture of me walking to this cloud expo, and this is my wife Amy. My sister-in-law was with me. You can kind of see that. Wow, we look so much younger. But anyways, and I was definitely a puppy back then. I was going to this conference, and I went into this conference, and this guy, it was literally this person. His name is Werner Vogels, and he's actually the Chief Technology Officer for Amazon Web Services. And there was a small group of us in this auditorium, maybe 100 people, maybe. And this Werner Vogels gets up and he starts doing a demo of all of these technologies that they've just created. And I was sitting in the audience, and this is honestly the thought I had. This technology is so advanced and so cool. You are out of a job. You have been replaced. And that was literally the thought that went through my head. And I sat there and I was panicking, because all of what he did, like something that took me days to do, he sat and he demoed in like 6 minutes, the ability to do what I would do in days. And I was just sitting in that chair thinking to myself, you're out of a job. Now, luckily, I didn't sit in that place for too long. And I do know that that happens sometimes to us. But about 15 minutes later, I caught my breath. I literally remember like the smells in the room, and I caught my breath and I had the thought, nope, this is your new job. And that's what began really my second, third career. I don't know how else you would describe it, like you had, kind of alluded to, Joanne. And that was really what began that journey for me. I went to work so fast forward, I like dove in and I was like, this is my new job. I learned everything I could about it. In 2010 to 2013, I went and worked and I started building systems in the cloud, started building systems on Amazon Web Services. And then I went to work for Amazon in 2014. I actually moved to the Seattle area, lived on an island, Bainbridge Island, actually, in the Pacific Northwest, and I worked for Amazon. When I was working at Amazon, I had a bunch of customers, a bunch of really just incredible customers, but they were mostly big customers in the Pacific Northwest. So like Nintendo, F5, Getty Images, you probably maybe know who they are. REI, you probably know who REI is. These were some of my customers that I was working with. And Nordstrom asked me, hey, who's a good consulting firm to do this cloud stuff on Amazon? And that started my whole journey into me starting a business, because I went and I did a bunch of research and I found that there was a market gap and that somebody needed to help fill this and that there was an opportunity. And I wrote, so at Amazon would like these kind of PowerPoint presentations. You don't see this at Amazon, like when they're internal, they don't do that. When you have an idea of how to do something, they actually have you write a document that they call a 6-pager. And the idea is, if you can't describe a problem and how you're going to solve it in 6 pages or less, it's too complicated and you can't do it. That's their theory. And so I wrote a 6-page document, and this is actually a screenshot of the beginning of it, called Project One Strategy. And I pitched it to the executive staff and VPs at Amazon. I was pretty brave. I still look back at that and I'm like, I can't believe that you did this. But you know what? It probably wasn't much harder than being a 16-year-old walking in and being like, can you log into the system? Like it honestly probably was about the same level of that, just being brave. So they read the document and they said, this is awesome. How can we help you? And that was what began my journey of starting my own business. So I started a business called One Strategy. And the idea and why I named it One Strategy was, what I saw when I did my evaluation was there was all these people that were trying to do Amazon Web Services and trying to do cloud, but they were trying to do everything else too. And I thought, what if I'm just good at this one thing? What if I just do one thing and I do it really well? And I'm just the very best of the very best. Let's just do that. And so that was the name One Strategy, meaning do one thing and one thing well. And so I started this business. My last day, this is a picture actually of me on my last day at Amazon. You can see my little Amazon blue badge down here in the corner on my hip. And I was, I don't know if you maybe don't know me well enough, but that is actually a terrified look on my face. That's the game face I have on right there. Cause I was like, oh, wow, you have 5 kids and you're leaving your job to go live out of your savings and start a business. And that was really how that began. A little bit about that journey of like deciding to start a business. It's honestly one of the strangest things to go through the process of starting a business. And I went through and for a long time, I thought about it for probably 2 weeks before I dared say it out loud, even to my wife, right? And this is the person who's like constantly my supporter and coach, and I just didn't dare say anything about it. So anyways, I finally got up the courage and I said something to her, and I was like, I think I should start a business doing this consulting stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I was hoping she'd say, no, that's a bad idea. She's like, yes, we should do it. This is a great idea. And I was like, no, that's not what you're supposed to say, you know? And so it began. So that was the beginning of this process. And I love this picture because it's really funny. This is like the starting a business, and you'll see some pictures of me. Like you saw that one. Like if you look at this versus how I look now, you see a lot. You can't right now because I cut it all off, but a lot more gray hair. I'm a lot older. It's really hard. And so I love this picture of like starting a business. You know, you got this optimism, all this stuff, and running a business is really hard. And then this is literally in a single day. I don't know how else to describe it, but in a single day, you'll have something that goes really well. You'll get an email, a signed contract, and then that'll be good. And then you'll see something and a customer doesn't pay an invoice and you're like, I can't make payroll. And then, you know, a check will come in at the last minute and all that. And like, it just is it's a roller coaster of emotions. And that's honestly what it kind of feels like. Not that I'm trying to scare you, but like, if you've had days like this, you just know how it is, right? So. All right, I'm pausing again. Questions, thoughts? Advisory services. You should just tell me, what did I do wrong in this scenario? That would be super helpful too.
No, it's great. I think it's taking that initiative and taking that jump is, yeah, it's not easy, but imagine yourself if you hadn't taken that at this point,
Yeah, I probably still wouldn't look like that. You know, I wouldn't be the fresh face. I just have different reasons for it, but yeah, that's true. You know, in that process, so I'll give you just a little insight into what the business was and what it became. So Amazon has a thing that they call their partner network. And so if you're a partner of Amazon, you get, I don't know, status, support, all those kinds of things. There's presently over 100,000 partners that Amazon has named, registered, whatever. They have a tier of partners that's called Premier, and that is literally their top tier, the very best partners that they have that have the best performance, they have the most technology advancement, they're the ones that are known for the cutting edge innovation that. And I was number 72 on that list of those Premier partners. So there was less than 100 of us out of, you know, at the time, I think 75,000 when I reached that status that were there. And we were a small team. But the reason we were up against companies that were 10 times our size, because we just did one thing. And we were so focused that we were the best at what we did. And there was all these big companies that had, you know, so much more revenue than us, but they weren't just doing Amazon, and we were just doing Amazon, and we were small, but we were being held up against, you know, these much bigger companies. So there's definitely something to be said for focus. So you can see in this logo down here, there's this says Tech Systems Global Services. Actually sold my company. I sold it in October of 2019. I sold my business and I stuck around with it for about 2 years, and then I joined Amazon, which is where I'm at now. I work for Amazon Web Services. A little bit about the island to island thing, how I got to Kauai. So I lived on an island, Bainbridge Island. The population of Bainbridge is 25,000, so it's not insignificant, but it also doesn't have the kind of visitor population that Kauai has to it. But it is cold in the winter, very cold, and it's dark and gray. It's a lot. It's a lot of darkness, actually. Most of the time, it's really gray. So I lived in the Pacific Northwest, and then in 2019, I decided I wanted to change, and I decided that I don't want to live in the dark gray. I'd sold my business. I was like, I need to do something different with life, and so I decided I would take the Northwest out of my location, so I would move to the Pacific instead of the Pacific Northwest. And that was when we made the decision to come to Kauai. We started looking for a place on the island in 2019, when I came in June of 2019, and then in October of 2019 and February of 2020. So like in 6 months, I was here like 3 times looking for properties. We went home on March 4th of 2020 from our last trip, and then the pandemic shut everything down. And then we found a house in July and made an offer on a house in July. We bought it in August, and then we moved in October of 2020. So that's how we got to Kauai. Thought I'd share with you just some of the work. This is kind of fun stuff. So one of the projects that we did with a customer was a company by the name of Holland America. They're a cruise line. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but they do cruises along the West Coast to Alaska, that kind of stuff. We did a project for them where we used a technology called machine learning. You guys have probably heard of this technology, where you teach computers to do things that humans can do, and in a lot of cases that humans can't do because of the computing power behind them. But what we did was they wanted to be able to predict what a passenger would do on a cruise before they go on a cruise. We were actually able to, using some data, we were able to predict with 95% accuracy who would use the spa or not on board a cruise, which is pretty fascinating. I don't think I could tell you with 95% accuracy if I was going to use the spa or not if I was going on a cruise, let alone to have a computer do that. We could actually also categorize about how much a person would spend in the spa. So we could say this person is going to go to the spa and they're going to spend $325. And we would be within a 10% plus or minus window of how much that was about 88% of the time. Almost 90% of the time we were accurate with how much a person would spend, which again, I think is fascinating. But we used computers to determine that. And if you want to talk about science, they call this data science because there is so much science and math and all of that in the work that we did. I learned so much about data and the relationships between data. That's really fascinating. We talk about how we're all connected in life and biology and all that, but like in data, it's even, I mean, it's just as evident. Kind of interesting. We were able to, so some of the key identifiers was based upon how much somebody paid for their ticket, how late did they buy their ticket, what their gender was, and how much the cabin class that they selected would help us determine all these factors. Just from a small data set, there was like 5 attributes, and that would give us all that data. We were able to predict that kind of stuff. Pretty fascinating. The casino was even more, which honestly, this is fascinating that you can predict how much somebody's going to gamble in a casino. Like the fact that that's actually a possibility is really kind of mind blowing to me. But we were able to predict 98% accuracy who would use the casino, who would spend any money in the casino. And then we could also tell them with about a $38 plus or minus margin, how much somebody would spend and gamble in the casino. I mean, if you think about just the science that goes into being able to do that and use computers, data, and the technology of the cloud to be able to do that, it's really an incredible use case and really fun stuff. And your interest in Joveline in space and that machine learning is all over the place in space. And so, that's something you could definitely look into too as something they're using. So the models that SpaceX uses to determine like their spaceships and all that stuff, like those are all machine learning models that they use to train and predict, you know, rockets and their paths and landing trajectories and stuff. So pretty awesome stuff.
Do you start with like 100 variables and then just do the analysis, or how do you?
Yeah. I'm glad you're asking this question. So this is where the science nerd comes out, and I love the fact that you asked this, because a lot of people will be like, "Oh, cool," and they won't ask me that. But you know, we actually, so there's a you're familiar probably with what they call random forest model. Have you heard of this? I had never heard of it. Essentially, what a random forest does is, yes, let's say there's 100 variables, although I think we started with less than that. I think there was 60 or something. And what a random forest does is it actually runs a path and it says, okay, I want to predict this variable that's in this column of data. And it will run a path and say, okay, if this equals this, and it's tied to this variable in this column and this, how is it related and does it predict this? That's essentially what a random forest does. Now imagine how many calculations you have to go through for a data set of 10 years of 68 variables and run every single path of that. You can see why you have to have a massive computing power to be able to do that. So a random forest, you don't tell it, like we didn't know. What was actually really interesting, so because you asked this question, I'll answer it. The one that shocked Holland America, that they were like, I had no idea. Based upon how many people were on the cruise ship in the casino, it determined whether or not a person would go to the casino. So extroverts and introverts essentially became a data point, because certain people were drawn into the casino when it was crowded and other people were drawn away from the casino when it was crowded, which is fascinating because they didn't know that. They had never thought of it. It was nothing that they had ever been looking at in their data sets. But because we used this random forest, which essentially tries millions upon millions of calculations just to try and predict one thing, we were able to identify and tell them, hey, actually, your cruise ship's optimal is this, right? When you have it this level, your casino is going to make the most money. So pretty fascinating stuff, but that's actually the science behind how that worked in the math. And essentially it's a math algorithm that's so dynamic and changes, and it essentially writes itself, right? It says, hey, if this attribute equals this, equals this, equals this, and I follow this train, and it's called a tree because it fans out through every data point. I think we ended, like we said, we had the top 5 predictors. We ended up with 20 something variables that we ended up passing into the model to get a prediction out. But the top 5 were like 80% of the data was all in the 5 attributes. So does that answer your question?
Well, you know, really, yeah, and it's really not that much different than like genomics work that I did, where you're in phylogeny and all that. It's like, it's just interesting to see it in this a totally different application. I wouldn't imagine, but yeah, it's super cool.
In business, right? In the business outcome that's there. So yeah, you know, it was interesting. So the people that were doing these predictions before we got in there working with them, they had 20 years of experience. They had run cruise ships, and they were the ones doing the predictions, and it would take them about a human, you know, month of hours of work hours to predict for that. And we were able to do a single cruise ship in about 3 seconds with a 2,000 passenger manifest and be exactly the same accuracy as they were. And we did that with a data scientist and a computer, and the data scientist had never been on a cruise in his entire life. So I'm like, and they were blown away by that, and so was I, you know, right? So anyway, pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. Very cool.
So, you know, I want to talk a little bit about one of the projects I'm working on now. So I work for Amazon. We can fast forward to that. I actually work for Amazon Web Services. I help customers in the strategic space, meaning like Amazon's biggest customers, those are my customers. So I work with their biggest customers. So Netflix is in the strategic account space. You've got Capital One, you know, that kind of stuff. So very large businesses, and those are the ones I work with. But I also am working on starting a technology education option on the island of Kauai. You remember how I mentioned that I went to technology schools because that was how I learned best and all that kind of stuff. I don't think that I'm alone in that sense. And so over the last year, I've been working on this idea of starting a code school on the island of Kauai, a technology school. And I won't just say code because we're going to do more than that. You know, the mission is really just to give technical talent options and make that a possibility. I found some pretty fabulous human beings to help me do this. This is AJ Webb. I think AJ, have you met AJ? I don't know if you've met AJ. Anyways, AJ goes to the same school as my kids. I think we were just talking about that, yeah.
Yeah, and Joveline AJ came to one of the events, and Joveline has been at many of the events, the hotspot events. So they could have interacted without knowing it at one of the hotspot events.
Yep, so this is Danny or Danielle. She is our director of operations. So she's actually helping run the business side of stuff because I do have my day job and that. So she's helping with all of those many wonderful things. I think you know Jason Bryant. I think that may be how we got connected actually. And then Joveline, do you know Keone? You mentioned robotics, so I'm not sure. I know Keone is like heavily engaged in the robotics space here on the island. He's a middle school teacher. But I don't know.
Middle school teacher for?
I do not remember which school he teaches at. I should know that.
The west side or east or?
I think it's on the east side. He lives here in Kalaheo though.
Maybe this?
Probably, yeah. Anyways, and then Dave Dooley, who's on the school board, those are some of our team members. So we're starting this program in March as our target for launch. We're currently targeting our first group March 22nd. Our initial group is only going to be offering this development track, but I'm working on the cloud engineer just because that's my background. But we'll be offering, you know, AWS cloud computing technology. But this full stack developer is the one that we'll be launching with here. So things like JavaScript, Node.js, that kind of stuff will be the education path that we'll have there. Yeah, I have this think big thing in here because this is one of the things that is an Amazon leadership principle that I really love. They, you know, I talked about that 6-pager thing, but they talk about how thinking small is a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think that's the quote they say, right? Which is essentially, if you don't believe that you can do something that's big, you can't do something that's big. And if you even can think about it, if you can even comprehend it, if you're even willing to do that, like Joveline saying, hey, I'm gonna go be a space engineer and do all those things. Like that's absolutely it. And Joanne with what it is you're doing. So the thinking big part. So that's where this is coming about, and this is what we're putting together. So our first group will be 5 students. We've decided to keep it to a small group, and then our second group we're going to start in September. This is the current plan. September we're going to target about 25 students. We're going to run this as a part-time course so that if people, you know, are not able to do it as a full-time thing, that's something that we can do. And then we are working on trying to get away so that we can have some of these as internships that are paid, like paid internships to pay people to go through this course and this education, as well as help them get jobs. So there's a program, and this is just a rough timeline, but there's a program that we're working on coordinating with through Amazon called Restart. And this is for individuals who are restarting careers, you know. They use the word underemployed, meaning either have part-time jobs or don't have jobs at all. They have a really incredible program that we're working on trying to become a part of. But yeah, some of the stuff that we're targeting, you know, I have 3 daughters. We're trying to help and support women in technology. That's a big piece of that. Obviously, we're focused on helping anyone that we can, but we also want to try and provide opportunities for, you know, Native Hawaiians and minorities that don't have access to some of these technology educations otherwise. If you live in Seattle, you live in some of those other geographies, you can there's coding schools. This stuff, I mean, the stuff is out and exists elsewhere. So we're trying to really bring that in. So these are the few of the things that we're working on there, but really kind of our core in our mission is we want to bring the technology and show that connection to the culture. So integrating the cultural aspects of Kauai and bringing people technology education. So that's really kind of the short little summary on that project that we're working on, but it's really exciting. I was talking to somebody from the Garden Island today. They're going to do an article in the paper on that, and then we're in process of applying for a grant to get some funding for like a location, although we also are potentially partnering with other places for locations as well. So anyway, that's a lot. I've been talking a lot, so I'd love to hear what questions you have or comments or anything.
I don't have much questions right now, but your story is pretty cool and it's really interesting as you're going through different slides. And yeah, I have a sister who's a senior right now, but she's kind of like swamped with work. So she couldn't be here today, but I'll definitely let her know to watch this recording and we will get in touch with you because she'll be super interested.
That would be awesome. Where is she working at? Is she's on the island here?
Yes, she's a senior right now at Waimea. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, Joveline and her sister Kathleen, they designed and ran the robotics camp last summer. They had the students building Vex robots and they taught them coding and taught them how to, so they had, after 3 days of camp, on the 4th day, they actually had a competition where the kids did the, what is it? Now I'm not going to remember the right word, but it was the autonomous and then the, control parts of the competition, just like the competition Joveline and Kathleen would have in high school. So yeah, they're a dynamic to do, and they actually it's a tripod because they also have a sister Kay who's a little younger, and they're all just really great. So
that's awesome. Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, I'm trying really hard to create inroads for technology and women because I have 3 daughters. I mean, not only just because of that, but that's one of my own personal motivator reasons for doing that. In the company that I started, we actually had a development or DevOps team that was greater than 50% women, which is actually really, really difficult to do, especially in such a male-dominated industry in technology like software development. So anyways, but you find a really good, strong leader that's very committed and passionate about it and let them go. And she did an incredible job of assembling probably one of the most effective and diverse teams I've ever seen. The majority of them didn't have even birth nationality in common. Like, it was just like an incredibly diverse group of people. So yeah, it's pretty awesome.
I just want to say that I think this is a great program that you're developing. It's one thing that my husband is constantly talking about. My husband is a programmer. He works at the base, and he's always saying we need something here for the kids to learn. We need technology here for the kids to stay and develop and improve the community and when they stay with their families, they're doing more for the community, not just putting money back into it, but they're being there for their family, where instead of going off to the mainland where those jobs are, and or going off to the mainland for the schools and everything. So that's one thing my husband has always said, we need more here for the kids. So that's
and I think that's
thing.
I know you have Jason on your board, and Jason we used to work with General Dynamics. General Dynamics always had a great internship program. I think they're not on island anymore, but I think at least 3 of the people who worked there were high school interns. And then, so they're a great model who have, but obviously we need like 100 times more. So this having actual training, I mean, it's just so exciting. Because yeah, I mean, I think one of the things about Kauai is we are small, but we have this amazing group of people here. And because we're small, it's actually a huge advantage to what we can actually do. So yeah, I think it's super exciting. And yeah, I think once people, especially we have so many bright students, once they get a hold of this, again, I think we're going to see benefits that in a faster way that you would in any other place because of the potential we have here.
I definitely agree. Yeah, this is something I'm excited for, like for the island of Kauai, and it's nice knowing that that's something that people can start to expect, and like this great opportunity, getting this training, getting the experience, and like it's right here on our island. We don't have to go anywhere, and it's like really home based. So I think it's really cool, and I think it's going to do so much for our community. So.
Definitely.
Thank you. Yeah, if you know, like I said, if you know anyone that you think might be interested either now or in the future, definitely would love to get them connected with us. Our website's just dev-island.org. So yeah, and we have information up there. There's an application site, like a application for it. There's a contact us, like anyone that you know. Honestly, we need to build our first group of our cohort, and we have enough applications, although I don't believe we have a diverse enough set of applications for that first cohort, but we need more for our second, and so on. So yeah, that would be great if you all know anyone, or can you just, even talking about it would be great. Hey, did you know that there's this thing? That would be super helpful. I don't have, because I haven't lived here as long, I don't have as large of a network, although I feel like I'm building one fairly quick, like because of people like Sarah and you all and that kind of stuff. Like I feel like we're doing pretty good. We did start a technology meetup, so that's helping. So yeah, that kind of stuff I think is good. But yeah, it's so wonderful to watch education and that come alive. Like in the people that I hired well, probably all up about 30 some odd individuals, and almost all of them knew nothing about Amazon Web Services when I hired them, because I couldn't afford to pay the money as a startup for all of the people that already knew a bunch about Amazon Web Services like myself. I just couldn't afford those kinds of people. And so I hired kids just out of school, people that were, college graduates. I had there. My last, I think it was 4 hires, maybe it was 3 hires. 4 hires. My last 4 hires, they had gone through a boot camp program like this. And one of them is the one who assembled that DevOps team I told you about. But they were so diverse in their backgrounds. One of them was a concert harpist before, no technology training whatsoever prior to that. One of them was like a director of operations or whatever in like a warehouse, I think it was, in Amazon. One was a naturopath doctor, like they just decided, hey, I want to change my career and all this stuff. An incredible developer, incredible DevOps engineer, and all of that, all from just a coding school, technology focused, rapid program. And I hired them, and they were some of the best hires I ever made, and just incredible people. So I'm a huge fan, beneficiary, and advocate for that kind of stuff. So yeah. So yeah.
And not to mention, especially on Kauai.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yep. I was going to say, if you can start a business, you can start a school. It's the same thing. So that's what we're doing. So yeah.
Yeah, and especially here. I mean, I used to work in a larger company, and if you can hire people locally, it's just better for everybody. And they're not going to come here and after 6 months want to go home. And it's, and nothing wrong with, I mean, I'm a transplant, so obviously there's a place for us, but being able to hire folks locally, it enhances the whole business, it enhances the community. I mean, everybody benefits. And it's just a better option all around. So
Definitely.
yeah, it's a huge deal. And yeah, well, I've always thought workforce development is so important. You know, that's how I got involved with KDB and all of that stuff. So it's, yeah, it's a game changer. And again, for our small island, yeah, look, we already have a leading utility in the whole world practically. Like,
Right.
we just need to add, there's so many other things we can become leaders in. So it's exciting.
I have a question for you. So like in your career or like careers like so far, what has been the most challenging or the largest obstacle you've had so far? And like what was it and what did you do to overcome it and stuff like that?
Wow. Wow, that's an incredibly deep question, but thank you. Let me think for just a moment on that. You know, a few things come to mind. Life is such a teacher and educator and journey in and of itself. I was my own worst enemy and my own greatest advocate all at the same time. And when I started my business, one of the things that I learned was under stress, your strengths are amplified and your weaknesses are amplified. And that was hard. It was really hard. I would say one of the hardest things for me was when I hired like my first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, all the way up. Like every time I hired a person, the first few times I actually asked, you know, I hired this young person, and I said, I'd like to meet your family. And they were like, what? And I said, I'd like to see the faces of the people who I'm committing to pay for putting food on their table, because I know what my family looks like. And when I make decisions, I would like to be able to picture whom I'm affecting in that. And it was really hard for me. I doubted myself a lot, because it's one thing to say, I can go get a job and support and provide for my family and my needs or whatever. It's a totally different thing to go make that commitment and do that for a lot of other people. Like, it is a really, really different stress profile and burden. And I don't regret it, but I felt just a heavy weight every time that I did that. It got to a point where I recognized it was much bigger than just me and myself, and I didn't have to carry all of that myself. But at first, that was a really hard thing to overcome. You know, that think big thing that I put up there in principle is really important, because I'm my own greatest limiter. We all are. We all keep ourselves from doing these incredible things in life. I mean, honestly, if you just looked at that and not looked at it from a positive side, who am I? Who am I to start a coding school on Kauai? Like, literally, I'm in many instances, I have no business whatsoever doing this thing, but I can do it, and it is possible, primarily just because I'm willing to even think about it and try it and talk about it. Talking about an idea is honestly probably the thing that makes an idea happen and come to pass more than anything. Because what happens in that is it becomes real, right? It becomes real from something we think about in that. So overcoming that aspect, weaknesses, you know, the burdens, it's hard in my career, you know, it was hard for me. I remember, so I originally, when I talked to my wife, we went without pay. Like, so I have a family of 5 and I lived out of my savings, and our plan was to do that 6 months. We had 6 months of a fund that I was like, okay, I think we can make it 6 months. Let's give this start a business thing a try. super scary. 5 kids, right? Like, what am I doing? I have nobody does this. Nobody draws their savings down to zero. My wife said, if we lose the house and we lose it all, it's okay. We've started from nothing before. It'll be fine. We could do it again. And I actually wrote a blog on this, but that experience of giving myself permission to fail at something gave myself permission to succeed. In my entire career, I had always given myself permission to succeed at something. I was like, yes, you can do this, right? From the time that I was willing to go sit in and interview for a job that I had no, business getting or whatever, I could barely, do, to this point. I was always like, yes, you can do this. But I'd never given myself permission to try something and know that if it failed, it was going to be okay. And so I think that that was another powerful obstacle, because when it shifted from you have to succeed at this thing, there is no other way, to you could fail at this and it will be okay. Like, it really gave me wings, it gave me lift, it gave me opportunity to look at myself and say, you're not a sum of your success, you're not a sum of your failures. Those are all the mechanisms by which you learn. And yeah, I would say those are a few of the things that come to mind. We all have our our pride and our ego. We don't want to fail. We don't want to be known as the person who started a business and failed or whatever. I may be known someday as the guy who tried to start a code school in Kauai and it failed, but I may be just known as the guy who tried to start a code school in Kauai, and that's okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. That was a longer answer than I'm sure you wanted, but that was working.
No, it's good.
No, very good. Very good. Yeah, well, I'm noticing I don't want to take up too much of your time, Rich, but do you guys have any other questions? Or, I mean, we're lucky. Rich is on island, so I know you're very busy, Rich, but you're here, so.
I'm not that busy. I'm no more busy than anyone else. I'm just as busy as you all are. So, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll reach out to you, or we'll be in touch, and get in touch with us too if you think there's ways that we can help you. That's the great part about being connected is it's you never know what comes from it. And
and Juvaline, I'd love to get you connected with John Benek, who's now at NASA. I'd love to just get you so you could at least connect with him and talk to him. So yeah. Okay. Yeah, and
Great.
if there's anything that I can do for you, Joanne or Sarah, let me know, okay?
Will do. Well, just doing this, we really appreciate it. And
Yes.
having you on as part of our pals is great. So
Yes, I am absolutely a pal, so yep. Thank you so much, and thanks for listening. Thanks for taking your time too. Fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
awesome.
All right.